I am Clara, I am 16 years old, and I live with my parents and my little brother, Lucas, 7, in a half-old building in the city center. It was a Saturday. My parents had gone out for a job dinner and left me taking care of Lucas. I was a little nervous, because it was the first time I was alone with him at night, but I thought, just lock the door and be good. The building is quiet. There are some neighbors that we greet in the elevator, but it is not exactly a place where everyone knows each other. That day started normal, with Lucas playing video games and me on my cell phone. But when the night fell, things got strange. I don't even know how to explain what I felt, but I will try to tell everything right, because to this day I don't know what to think about it. Around 10 p.m., I was in the room with Lucas, who was already a little sleepy on the couch, watching a drawing. Then, out of nowhere, I heard a noise at the door of the apartment, like someone stirring in the doorknob. It wasn't a beat, you know? It was a light sound, as if the person had tried to rotate the doorknob very slowly. My heart has already jumped, because no one warned that I was going to pass here, and my parents would only come back after midnight. I stared at the door, paralyzed, and Lucas lifted his head, asking, "Clara, what was that?" I sent him to be quiet and went foot to the door, with his cell phone in his hand, already thinking of calling my father. When I got close, the noise stopped, but I swear I could hear someone breathing on the other side. My whole body froze, and I didn't know if I locked the door harder or screaming. I stayed there, with my heart in my mouth, trying to understand what was happening. I was a good second stopped in front of the door, with my cell phone shaking in my hand, trying to decide what to do. The silence on the other side was worse than the noise, because now I didn't know if the person was still there or not. Lucas began to move the couch, whispering a "Clara, are you afraid?" who annoyed me, but also made me go back to reality. I told him to be quiet and go to the room, but he was stuck to the couch, his eyes wide. I went to the door and looked at the magical eye, but everything was dark, as if someone was covering the lens. My stomach rolled on the spot. I thought about screaming something like, "Who's there?" But my voice didn't come out, and I didn't want to scare Lucas even more. So I took him by the arm, took it to the bedroom and locked the door, trying to stay calm so as not to panic. I sat on the bed with him, hugging him hard, and kept looking at the cell phone, thinking if I called my parents or straight to the police. As we were in the room, I heard another noise, this time lower, as if someone had slightly knocking on the door of the apartment. It was not a normal beat like someone who wants to enter. It was rhythmic, almost as if the person was hitting his nails, you know? Tosi tiosi, tiosi tiosi. Very slowly. My heart was fired, and Lucas began to cry softly, clinging to me. I was trying to convince myself that it was just a drunk neighbor or someone who missed the apartment, but deep down I knew there was something wrong. The building is small, only 4 floors, and we know most of the neighbors. No one would do this by that time, especially such a weird way. I tried to call my father, but his cell phone was out of the area, and my mother didn't answer. I was alone, with my little brother terrified, and that noise would not stop. I swear, every beat it seemed like it was inside my head. I didn't know what to do, seriously. I was locked. The scratch in the room stopped, but now I heard some light steps, like someone walking carefully not to make noise. My apartment is small, so any sound echoes easy, and those steps looked so close that I felt the floor shake on my chest. Lucas was quiet now, but with his eyes full of tears, and I just hugged him, trying to think of something. I took the phone again, with my hand trembling so much that I almost dropped, and sent another message to my parents, something desperate like, "Please come back now." Nothing, no answer. I thought of screaming through the window, but we live on the 3rd floor, and the street was dead at that time. I was imagining 1,000 things. What if it was a thief? What if it was worse? My head was chaos, and the worst thing was to feel that those who were outside knew exactly that we were at home. Then I heard a click, like the sound of a lock. My heart stopped at the time because it seemed that it came from the front door. I was almost certain that the person had managed to open the door, but how? The lock was one of those good, with 2 laps, and I had checked before I went to the room. I kept looking at the bedroom door, waiting for her to open any second, and Lucas began to whisper, "Clara will die?" What broke me inside I tried to keep calm and said no, that it was just someone lost, but my voice was shaking. I took scissors that was on Lucas's desk, because it was the only thing that looked like a gun. The steps stopped, but now there was a new noise, as if someone had moved the things in the room, like drawers being opened very slowly. I was so afraid that my vision was blurring, and I swear I felt a cold in my pimple, as if something had been too wrong there that I was clinging to the scissors, with Lucas glued to me, and every noise of the room seemed to punch in the stomach. The drawers have stopped being moved, and now it had a heavy silence, one that make you hold your breath. I didn't know if it was better to be quiet or try to make noise to scare who was there. My cell phone was in hand, but the battery was almost over, and I didn't want to spend what was left by calling the police if it was nothing. But really, how could it be nothing? Who enters an apartment of others at 11 p.m. and stirring things? I tried to peek under the bedroom door, but it was dark, and the room light was off. Lucas was so quiet that it seemed that he didn't even breathe anymore, and I felt him shaking against me. That's when I heard a new sound, like a low murmur, as if someone had talked alone across the wall. The sound of the furniture being dragged stopped out of nowhere, and the silence came back, so heavy that I felt it pressing my chest. I had the scissors in my hand, Lucas clinging to me, and my eyes stuck to the bedroom door, waiting for the worst. Every second it seemed eternity, and I didn't know if the person was still there or was gone. I tried to hear anything, but I only listened to my breath and Lucas's heart hitting me. Suddenly, I heard a loud noise, like the apartment door knocking hard, as if someone had ran. My whole body relaxed for a second, but I was still afraid to leave the room. I waited for a few minutes, which looked like hours, and finally created courage to spy through the magical eye of the bedroom door. The corridor was empty, and the light of the room was lit again, which made me even more confused, because I was sure it was erased before. I left the room slowly, with Lucas behind me, and went to the room, still holding the scissors. The door of the apartment was locked, as if nothing had happened, but the coffee table was out of place, as if someone had actually dragged her. There was nothing stolen, nothing broken, just that unusual detail. The next day, my parents arrived at dawn and didn't believe much in history. They thought I was exaggerating. But then, talking to the liquidator, she told me that the elderly neighbor on the bottom, her Geraldo, that guy everyone finds kind, was seen walking down the hall that night. He already had a history of entering the building of other people, drooling things, and even had complaints against him. The worst, he never explained why he did that, and when they asked, he just laughed and said he liked to know the neighbors. To this day, I don't know what he wanted in our apartment, and just thinking that he was there, muttering and stirring things, I feel a shiver. Everything stopped out of nowhere, as it started, and I never wanted to be alone at home. I rented a house in the middle of nowhere, in a rural area here in the interior of Sao Paulo, to work in peace in my writing project. It was a simple wooden house, surrounded by tall bush and tortuous trees. The silence was almost absolute, only broken by the noise of crickets at night. I thought it was perfect, you know? Away from the city, without neighbors, just me and my notebook. I got there one Saturday morning with the strong sun, and spent the day organizing my things. But on the first day, I felt something strange. It was not obvious at all, but it seemed that the air had a weight, as if someone was looking at me. I thought it was just paranoia to be alone in such an isolated place. But at night, as I tidied up the kitchen, I heard a snap outside like a breaking branch. I went to the window, but I saw nothing but the darkness and the bush swing with the wind. That made me restless, but I tried to ignore. In the early afternoon, while writing on the porch, I noticed something weird. It had a strange shine in the middle of the trees, about 50 meters from the house. It looked like a reflection, like a piece of glass taking sun. I took my binoculars, yes, I take one to watch birds, don't judge me, and tried to see what it was. My heart froze when I realized it was a camera, kind of camera pointed out home. I was paralyzed, thinking, who the hell puts a camera in the woods? I tried to convince myself that it could be animal monitoring equipment type for hunting or research, but the angle was very specific, straight to my balcony. I went down there, with my cell phone in hand, my heart hitting the throat. When I got close, I saw that it was a small, camouflaged camera, stuck in a trunk. There was no license plate, no identification, just a little thread that disappeared on the floor. I tried to pull but seemed buried. I came home with the feeling that every movement of mine was being watched. And the worst, I had no idea who. Back home, I locked the door and started walking around, trying to understand what was happening. My head was 1,000, imagining 1,000 scenarios, from illegal hunters to some obsessed psychopath. I took the phone and called the owner of the house, a guy named SCU Zay, who looked good people when I signed the contract. He swore he didn't know any camera, said the house was empty for months and maybe it was something of some old tenant. I don't know if I believed, because his voice trembled a little, as if he had hiding something. I decided to give a general, looking for anything strange. I started with the rooms, looking behind the furniture, under the bed, even in the sockets. Nothing. But when I arrived in the room, I noticed that the large mirror on the wall seemed a little crooked, as if it was not well fixed. I got closer and saw a tiny shine behind him, almost imperceptible. My stomach rolled when I realized it was another tiny camera, embedded in the frame. Anyone who put it there knew exactly what he was doing. I took the mirror out of the wall carefully, as if exploding at any time. The camera was small, the size of a coin, with a wire that descended into the wall. I was sweating cold, my hands shaking, and I started to wonder how many of these things they had around the house. The worst thing was to think that someone could be seeing me right now, watching every step of mine. I took a knife from the kitchen and started poking the drywall behind the mirror, trying to follow the wire. I managed to open a hole and found a thin cable, coming down to the floor and disappeared in a footer. There was no way to follow without breaking everything. I stared at the hole, with the feeling that whatever was on the other side already knew I had discovered. The silence of the house seemed heavier now, as if the air itself was expecting something. I decided to cover the camera with a cloth and sat on the couch, trying to decide whether to call the police or if I tried to solve it alone. I decided that calling the police could be exaggeration, at least for now. I was in the middle of nowhere, and will it take hours to arrive? I grabbed a flashlight and decided to look for more cameras inside and outside the house. I started with the backyard, illuminating every corner of the ground. The high bush made it difficult, but I found another camera, this time on an old pole, half hidden by leaves. Like the first, camouflaged, pointing to my room window. My heart was fired, and I started to feel a cold in my pimple, as if someone was right there, watching me in the darkness. I came back and locked everything, doors, windows, even put a chair against the back door. I sat in the living room with the flashlight in my hand and started thinking about who could be behind it. A neighbor? There was no neighbors per kilometers. A stalker? But I had not told almost anyone who was going to this house. The worst was silence, so heavy that I heard my own heart beating. As I tried to calm down, I noticed a low noise, almost like a buzz, coming from the attic. The house had a trapdoor on the roof of the hallway, which I hadn't even opened yet. I grabbed a broom and climbed into a chair, with a whole tense body, waiting for what? When I pulled the trapdoor, a wooden stairs came down with a range that made me jump. I lit up there with the flashlight, and my stomach wrapped it. There was an old mattress, a cans of food, and what seemed to be a small off, but with a cable connected to a makeshift router. Someone had been there, maybe for weeks, and I didn't even know. The tinnitus was from the router, which was still on. I ran down with the feeling that anyone who could still be around. I closed the trapdoor and put a dresser underneath, as if it were to protect me. My God, I was terrified, thinking I could have someone hidden in the house all the time. I was shaking, sitting on the corridor floor, with the flashlight pointed to the trapdoor as if he were opening any time. My head kept spinning. Who put that monitor there? What if the person was still in the house, hidden in some corner? I took my cell phone, but the signal was terrible, barely carried a bar. I tried to call the emergency anyway, but the call fell all the time. I decided to send a message to my friend Tiago, telling what was happening, if something happened to me. As I typed, I heard another snap outside, just like the first night, but now closer, as if it were on the porch. My heart almost came out my mouth. I took the knife again and went to the room window, peering through a crack in the curtain. I saw no one, but the bush was swinging, and there was no wind. I stood there, holding my breath, hoping to hear anything. That's when I realized that the attic tinnitus had suddenly stopped, as if someone had turned off something. I went back to the corridor with the flashlight in hand and looked at the trapdoor. The dresser was still there, but I swear it seemed that the trapdoor was a little raised, as if someone had tried to open. I was panicked, but I needed to know if I had anything else in the house. I took courage and began to review each corner, opening cabinets, looking behind the doors, even in the tiny bathroom. In the guest room, I found something that made me freeze. An old backpack, thrown in a corner, with dirty clothes and a notebook. I opened the notebook with tremendous hands and saw notes, like a diary and schedules. There were things like, arrived at 8 a.m., writing on the porch at 14h, slept at 11 p.m. It was my routine. Damn, someone was writing down every step of mine. I closed the notebook on time, afraid to read more, and threw the backpack on the floor. My God, I didn't know if I was running out or locked me in the room. It was clear that anyone who was doing this knew exactly where I was all the time. I stood in the room, holding the notebook like a bomb. My head was exploding questions, but fear was greater than curiosity. I decided that I couldn't stay in the house, not with someone spying on me like that. I took my backpack, threw my cell phone, wallet, and notebook inside, and decided to leave, even being night. But when I arrived in the room to get the car key, I heard a new noise, like a slow drag, coming outside, very close to the front door. My body crashed. It was like someone walking slowly on the porch, dragging their feet on the wooden floor. I took the knife again and kept looking at the door, waiting for her to open any second. I didn't open the curtain. I didn't have the courage, but I saw a shadow pass through the window crack, very fast, as if someone had run. My heart was in my throat, and I didn't know if I shouted, ran, or was quiet. I could only think that those who were out there knew that I had found the notebook and the cameras. I tried to convince myself to go out to the car, but my legs looked like gelatin. I went to the kitchen, where I had a smaller window that gave it to the backyard, and peered carefully. Nothing, only darkness, and the bush stopped. But then, out of nowhere, I saw a weak reflection, like a cell phone, about 20 meters from the house. Someone was there in the dark, and it seemed like looking straight at me. I deleted the flashlight on the spot and lowered myself. My heart fired. I was crouched on the kitchen floor, trying not to make noise, but my breath was so high that I was sure I could hear from the outside. The worst thing was knowing that this person, whoever it was watching me for days, maybe weeks, and I had no idea who it was or what I wanted. I took the phone and tried to send another message to Tiago, but the sign was even worse. That's when I heard a low click, as if someone had tried to turn the door handle. They were trying to enter. The click on the doorknob made me freeze. I was crouching in the kitchen, holding the knife so hard that my hand hurt. The silence that came later was worse than the noise, because I kept wondering what the person was doing on the other side of the door. Was it forcing the lock, or just waiting for me to make any movement? My head screamed to run, but where? The car was about 10 meters from the house, and I didn't know if the person was alone or if there was someone else out there. I decided to drag myself to the room very slowly, not to make noise. I grabbed the car key that was on the table and stared at the back door, waiting for another sound. Nothing, only the silence and the noise of my own breath. So, out of nowhere, I heard a low whistle, like a short melody, coming from the backyard. It was so clear, so human, that it almost made me scream. Who whistle in the middle of the night, in the dark, on the side of an isolated house? It was clear that it was to scare me, and my God was working. I stuck to the floor with my cell phone in my hand, desperately trying to get a signal. I tried to call police again, but the call didn't complete. I sent another message to Tiago, something like, "I'm in danger. Helps me." But I didn't know if I had sent it. The whistle stopped, and then came a worse noise. A slow scratch in the living room window, as if someone was passing the nail on the glass. My whole body trembled, and I felt a cold that didn't explain. I looked to the side of the curtain and saw that reflection again, the same one that looked like a cell phone, but now closer, almost glued to the window. You couldn't see a face, just the shine. I got up slowly with the knife in front and went to the switch to turn off all the lights in the house. If they were seeing me, I wouldn't make it easier. I was in the dark, listening to silence, and started to smell strange, like gasoline or something chemical, coming from somewhere. That's when I realized that if I didn't go out soon, it could be too late. The smell of gasoline was getting stronger, and I knew I couldn't stay there anymore. I took my backpack, the knife, and decided to risk running to the car. Each step seemed an eternity, with the ground gritting down my feet. I arrived at the front door, turned the key with tremendous hands, and opened only a crack to peek. I didn't see anyone, but the reflection of the cell phone was still there, now on the other side of the backyard, as if the person had moved. I ran out without looking back, with my heart beating so loud that I drowned out any other sound. I got in the car, locked the doors, and started the engine. When I looked at the rearview mirror, I swear I saw a stopped silhouette in the corner of the house, just looking without moving. I stepped deep into the accelerator, and the dirt road seemed infinite as I tried to walk away. The smell of gasoline was still in my clothes, as if he had stuck to me. I didn't stop until I arrived in a small town about 20 kilometers, where I finally got a sign on my cell phone and called the police. The police went to the house the next day, but found nothing. The cameras were gone, the monitor in the attic was no longer there, and the backpack with the notebook was also disappeared. The trapdoor was closed, as if no one had moved. The only sign of something strange was a gallon of empty gasoline, thrown in the backyard, which I swear I wasn't there before. I told them everything, showed the messages I sent to Tiago, but they said I had no proof of crime, just vandalism. I went back to town the same day and never stepped on that house again. To this day, I don't know who was watching me, not why. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with the feeling that someone's still watching me, as if that whistle still echoed in my head. The worst is that I have no answers, and I think I will never have. I just know that I never rent a house in the middle of nowhere. I was never impressed easy. I live in a small apartment with a friend since the second half of college, and we always take things good. It is a simple apartment, 2 bedrooms, living room and kitchen, half old, with that plaster lining on the ceiling that makes some crack when it changes time. We divide the bills, take turns cleaning, and until a while ago, everything worked well. But for a few months here, I started to realize some strange things that made no sense. First were a food that disappears. Like, I was sure I had left a frozen lasagna in the freezer and, out of nowhere, she was no longer there. I thought my friend had eaten and said nothing, normal. But then it happened again with other things. And he swears he wasn't him. What started to make me really stuffed was a day when I woke up at dawn with a strange noise. It was like a light, half-stuffy creak, as if someone was walking slowly, only above me. I thought it was the upstairs neighbor, but the problem is that we live on the top floor. There is no one above. I was a long time lying down, immovable, trying to understand if I had imagined that or if it was just the old building making noise. But after that, I began to notice that almost always between 3 and 4 in the morning has some kind of sound from the ceiling. And it doesn't look like mouse or plumbing. It really looks only light, as if the person was trying not to make noise. I started to pay more attention. I even started leaving the phone recording audio at night, just to see if I was getting paranoid. On the first night, he took nothing but crackles, but the second time I could clearly hear 3 space steps, well above my room. Worse, before the steps, it had a low sound, as if a lid had been pushed slowly, like wood scraping. When I heard this in the morning, my stomach turned. I showed to my friend and he was a little without reaction, but he laughed and said that I was freaking out, that it should be wind, I don't know. But the lining window is locked, and there is no way for the wind to make this kind of specific noise. I started to avoid sleeping early. I was awake listening and trying to understand what was happening in that ceiling. One day I took courage and climbed into a chair to take a look at the lid of the hall. She has no lock, just fits. When I pushed, I smelled strange, a mixture of mold with something I couldn't identify at the time, but gave me an instant nausea. The light of my cell phone did not light up in there. It was just a dark space, dusty, with wooden beams and loose wiring. I saw no one, but I noticed that one of the tablets on the floor of the lining was a little loose, as if someone had moved there. I went down with a fast heart, sweating cold, and I didn't even say anything to my friend this time. I felt that if I kept poking it alone, I would find something I didn't want. In the same week, I realized that some of me was out of place. It was nothing stark, but like my deodorant in another corner of the sink, a towel that I was sure he had hanging and appeared bent over the bed. Subtle thing, but I knew I didn't move. I started locking the door of my room at night, and then it got even weaker. The next day, the doorknob had some marks, like scratches, as if someone had tried to open with something. I was in shock. I didn't tell my friend again, because he was already starting to think I was paranoid. But it was not paranoia. I knew there was something wrong in that apartment. The feeling of being observed began to follow me all the time, even when I was in the bathroom. With every little noise, I jumped. The next night, I left a silly trap. I stacked some pot lids right on the edge of the kitchen shelf on the fridge. The idea was that if someone passed there stirring something, the lids would fall, and fell. 3 and a little in the morning, according to the sound of the lids hitting the floor and a fast noise, as if someone had run back to some corner. I jumped out of bed, got out of the room on the spot, heart in my mouth, but the apartment was in the most complete silence. Lights off, my friend snoring in his room. I went to the kitchen with my cell phone tremendous in my hand, and the lids were scattered on the floor, just as I had predicted. Only there was no one else there. Nothing. I opened the lining door again, but I didn't have the courage to go up. I stared at that dark hole for a few minutes until closing and returning to the room, unable to sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I went to talk to the building liquidator. I told you that I was hearing noises on the ceiling and that I thought you could have some animal or whatever, someone living there. He giggled and said that it has happened before many years ago, but I didn't want to go into detail. I found that super strange. I insisted a little, and he only said that the building is old and has some spaces in the lining that are big enough for a person to hide. But no one stirred there since a renovation they did about 6 years ago. I came home feeling even worse. I wondered what he meant by, that happened before, and why aren't there a lock in that access? That night, I locked the bedroom door again, pushed the dresser against it, and left a kitchen knife under the pillow. It may seem exaggeration, but I was getting on the edge. I slept badly as always, but what happened at dawn was the worst of all. At about 3:45, I woke up with a dry noise, like a light thud, and then my bedroom knob was turned. Only I had locked. Then came a lighter sound, as if someone had tried to push the door slowly. Paralyzed. I was in full silence, even trying to hold my breath. I couldn't see shadow under the door, because it's pretty close to the floor, but I felt that there was someone there on the other side. I waited a couple of minutes that looked like hours. Then I heard steps heading towards the kitchen, and then nothing more. I was awake until the day dawned. And that day, I decided I was going to scour the entire lining with a flashlight, knife, whatever, because something or someone was sharing that apartment with us, and I couldn't stand living with this doubt anymore. I waited my friend to go out to class and went up alone. I put a chair under the lining lid of the room and tied a flashlight on my head with tape, just like those exploration videos. The smell up there was even worse than the first time. Dust, mold, and a stench that I can only describe as something rotten. I got on my knees, carefully not to fall between the beams, and I was crawling. And that's when I saw it. In the corner, near the outer wall, there was a thin mattress, covered with a dirty sheet. On the side, some packaging of food, including the lasagna that was gone. It even had a cut pet bottle, like a bathroom improvisation. But the worst thing was to find a flashlight, a coat and a bag full of clothes, and paper, many papers, tickets written by hand. Some scribbles that looked like maps of their own apartment, with bizarre notes like, leaves at 14H, free kitchen after midnight, and doesn't trust the right. It destroyed me inside. I started to sweat cold. My vision was cloudy for a few seconds. There was someone living there with us, watching everything we did, every routine, every time. I started backwards without even thinking properly, my head spinning. I went down from the lining so fast that I almost fell off the chair. I called my friend at the time, sending him back home. He thought I was an outbreak, but it came. When he saw with his own eyes, he was pale. We called the police the same day. They did a survey and said they didn't find anyone there at the moment, but admitted that someone could really have lived there. They got the tickets and the clothes. They said they were going to investigate, but they never returned. Since that day, we have never heard anything from the ceiling again, as if the person had felt that we discovered and simply had gone away, out of nowhere. To this day, I don't know who it was, and the frightening of all is to think that we may never know. We considered moving, but we ended up staying. We install a real lock on that lining lid and put cameras inside the ape, including a straight pointed to the lining. Since then, nothing more happened. No noise, no food disappeared, no strange movement. But that's exactly what makes me sick. The way everything just stopped. As if the person who was there had felt that it was discovered and only, without leaving a trail, without making noise, no return. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the ceiling and thinking about how many nights that person was up there, listening to us to talk, sleep, live normally without having the idea of her presence. It's been a few months, but I can't sleep in peace yet. It's no longer fear of noise or invasion. It's a kind of silent paranoia. I start thinking about every time I left the bedroom door open, everything I said thinking that only my friend was listening, how I left the bathroom unlocked. And the worst is knowing that this may have happened to other people and they have no idea. To this day, I don't know who it was, how it entered, or how long it was there. I just know it was. And this is more than enough to move anyone's head.